This is a video on how to build Glacial. Many people ask about PTA versus Glacial, when to go one or the other, but simply I can't do all of that in one video, so this is a video for Glacial only. I have three main builds: Glacial Shirelias, Turbo Chem Tank, Gale Force, and when do you build which, or for example, we're going to cover why does the guy that is a Korean Taric jungle go Chem Tank first instead of Shirelias like I do. And I have a nice chart to cover that, but let's go with saying this first. A lot of this season, we've been going Glacial Stridebreaker, and it was a very successful build, had like 55% win rate and all this cool stuff, but we don't go it anymore because Stridebreaker got nerfed, which removed the dash. When they removed the dash, they increased the slow on it by a significant amount. So if you're going Stride, it's extremely wasteful because you already have a very strong slow. You don't really need Glacial anymore, so that build is now either Phase Rush or PTA, but we're just going to worry about the current state of Glacial. I usually go Shirelias. It's very rare that I'll pick up Chem Tank or Gale, but they are viable for their own reasons. So, the main reason that I think that Shirelias is the best among them there's for various reasons, but just to cover this topic, you don't need mana. This already has mana regen in it. So you don't need to pick up tier like you do with either of these other builds, or go any kind of weird mana rune to do it, because you already have the mana regen in the item, and it's cheap, right? And let's just get into, before I explain pros and cons of these, let's just look at the graph first. Or actually, maybe it makes more sense. I'm gonna do pros and cons first, because then if we look at the graph after, it'll make more sense. So, pros and cons to each build. Shirelias is really, really great for empowering your teammates, empowering yourself. Every time you heal or shield somebody, you get movement speed, and you have an active that increases that even more to everyone around you. And that movement speed is any direction at all. You can go forwards, backwards, behind you, to the sides, wherever, right? You can use it to run away, you can use it to run in, and of course it affects everyone as well as yourself, so it's really good, right? And of course it has mana, it has CDR, it has AP, all things that Taric uses, and it's really good. Chem Tank is good as well, right? Chem Tank is really good because Chem Tank itself has an active slow, which means that it will proc Glacial on your first item. So if you have one item with Chem Tank, that means you can run at them, you can activate it, you can run straight at them, and once you get close enough to them, the Glacial Zone will proc, and they will all be slowed, right? They're going to be slowed in place off of one item alone. And it clears decently well. It has decent items. It has some MR, CDR, armor, all of that good stuff that you want, and it's fairly cheap. So that's nice as well. Gale Force is really good. It's are called Flying Stun Jujitsu, so if you see that, just know that that's Gale Force, where of course it gives you a free dash and some nice damage to instantly get on the enemy. So it's really good because that dash really surprises people. You can land most stuns in the game that you would have otherwise missed, or somebody dash away from. It guarantees that you're landing that stun. And of course the damage, right? Once you have Noon Quiver, you can clear faster than any other build in the game by just going Noon Quiver and just destroying camps as soon as you can with the Noon Quiver. So, and let me just go into the cons, right? This one, you know, for Shirelias, you don't have that much damage. Your clear speed is good because of what you have, but it doesn't have any inherent AD. It doesn't have a burn on it. It's not actually super good for clearing camps other than the AP that you get, CDR, and mana, which all help your clear, but they don't help you as something as much as a burn or something as much as raw AD does, right? The issue with... And it also doesn't have any resist either, so there's no resist at all in Shirelias, which leaves you somewhat squishy, right? But you can argue that you can avoid the damage more because of your movement speed, but regardless, that's that. Turbo Chem Tank. Turbo Chem Tank is great because, of course, you know, active slow, I already explained that. The issues with Turbo Chem Tank is that you must go inward with it, right? Unlike Shirelias, you must go in by yourself and get close enough to the enemy to actually proc Glacial. This, a lot of the times, you know, you could go in, you could go out, or, you know, in mid-games, in fights you're trying to escape, you're forced to go in. You have no way of backing off of fights with Chem Tank. And also, the current meta, there's a lot of shred in the game. There's Void Staff that exists. There is Kraken Slayer and Grudge and all of these shred items. So having resist early is great, But once you get to those later parts of the game, like the resist doesn't help you as much as having either flat AP or flat HP or healing, because everyone on the enemy team is going to have cleaver or any item that shreds resist to pieces, and it's going to be wasted. So there's no reason to even have that much resist like during this season. You just can't stack resist. And Gale Force, you know, it clears fast. The issues with Gale Force are that it's not tanky. You have a single item and it takes a long time to build it since it's expensive, and it does a lot of damage, but during that time, once you hit Gale Force, you still have to keep farming because you're still too squishy to actually do normal fights. You need to, you know, you can use the active to escape or, you know, to go in, of course, but you'll still get blown up instantly if you're not having your ulti. And so it's also, you know, very expensive. And the cons with both Turbo Chem Tank and Gale, unlike Shirelia's, is that they don't have any inherent mana in them. So you need to pick up tier or have some sort of mana-based like rune that really works for you to go those builds. And then we're not going to really cover others. You could argue Stridebreaker, you could argue Moonstone, you could argue, you know, a few different other mythics, like Everfrost is viable, right? There's a few other mythics that you could go other than these three, but we're just going to leave them in kind of a graph of their own. So now that you heard all of that, this graph will make a lot more sense. Starting at the very basic, you have one item and you have Glacial, right? With these builds, if you have only one item and that fight is the game-winning fight, then Chem Tank is the best item. Shirelia's by itself is not good enough with Glacial to say that it is 100% the best, right? But once you have Chem Tank, right, once you actually get into the 2 item spikes where you pick up the Randuins, you have another active slow, it becomes much weaker. Or it doesn't, you know, it becomes stronger, but it's not as strong as some other options, right? And you can argue this could be even like this could probably be even a little bit more, right? Because once you have the Gale, here, let me just change this on the fly, even though this should have been correct already. Let's just change this to 5, right? Something like this. It's good, right? Once you hit the 2 item spike with Gale and Randuins, you have the repositioning ability, which I'm going to show later, and you know it's good, but you know, it doesn't really pop off until 3 items because you need to become tanky. Once again, the issue with Gale is that you're not tanky enough to use it. So you need to actually get to this 2-3 item spike to say that going Gale has been like super useful, right? And like I was talking about with Chem Tank, once the game goes on and the enemy is picking up these shred items that either deal true damage or destroy all of your armor or whatever, you know, your MR is gone, you know, it's not going to work. It's going to be at like very bad. Like for example, a build we didn't talk about like Sunfire Wits, it's really bad to go against AP. It should be good against AP champions, but it's not, because you can just build Void Staff, and once the enemy has Void Staff, you're completely screwed. You can't really do anything about that. So this build falls off because of the fact that Shred is so powerful, right? Whereas other builds can pick up more healing and some other things, right? Also, Shirley's being very cheap. It's really, really good. I would say that the 2 item spike with Glacial Randuins is the best item spike in the game. You know, if you were 3 items with Gale, Randuins, and Mikhails or something, you'd be tanky enough to fly in and do everything you want. But obviously, even in the late game, right? You consider what items can do in the late game. Still, in that 4 to 5 item situation in late game, you're still going to want Shirelia's. Shirelia's empowers your entire team, everyone moves fast, and you can activate it to go even faster, and it's just more effective. Because regardless if they're melee, if they're ranged, you know, you're taking Glacial a lot of times when they can kite you out, Shirelia's is going to be the best option. Because, as I'll show you soon, Chem Tank isn't as effective if your own team can't go in. So now, to get into positioning, let's pull up this 3rd grade drawing I made in Paint while on stream. So you can see the legend down here. I should have worked on it a little bit more, but it's a basic understanding, right? In the Shirelia's case, here's Taric, this one. You're going to move at a certain speed, right? You're going to be fast, and your teammates are going to be fast, right? And you want to move past the front line and get to a spot in the middle where you can Randuins and affect more people. You know, if you hit the, you know, if you have Flash, you could even get to that perfect spot where, guess what, you can even do more, right? You could hit all 5 at once, right? It's possible. You know, these are just, this is not to scale. This is just hypothetical, right? You run in with Glacial, or you run in with Shurelya's, your team can run in with Shurelya's, and then the Glacial proc can, you know, hit it wherever you want Randuins to be used. Now, when you have something like Chem Tank, when you run at them with Chem Tank automatically procs in the first thing you run into. So if you run at the front line, like, I don't know, the Ornn or whatever, right? Your Glacial's instantly going to be used. So if you're trying to get to that backline to slow the backline so your own team can get on them, it's just not going to work, right? Because not only are you like slowing the front line for no reason, but your team doesn't have the movement speed that Shurelya's gives you to actually get to that backline anyway. You could argue that with Chem Tank and Glacial, once you activate Chem Tank and go in, right, you could maybe flash to that spot, that sweet spot, and hit all 5 of them with the Chem Tank Randuins. But if you're running Ghost, you know, you just have to walk in a straight line until you get there. So it's arguable. It is or it's not, right? And same thing with Gale Force Glacial though, because yes, once again, somebody just said in the chat, this is not to scale. Clearly, Gale is not this long, but when you have Gale Force, you have a dash that is basically the length of a Flash, if not a little bit longer, I think, or you know, regardless, the same length, where you're going to be able to move instantly to that very spot. Like, imagine you have Flash, though. Imagine you have Flash, right? You Flash, and then you Gale Force, and then you hit the Randuins, like, in that exact spot that hits all of them. It's much, much easier to reposition with Gale Force, and it's much quicker, right? Shurelya's is very obvious. Chem Tank is very obvious. It's very clear to see that you are going in at them, and you intend to fight them, right? With Gale Force, you could just be standing there, and then all of a sudden, boom, you know, Flash Gale Force, or, you know, Ghost Gale Force, and it's a lot more burst. It's a lot more unexpected to use the Gale Force to move like that. So, you know, you could analyze that all you want, but I could just show you. So, let's imagine that this is your front line. I'm not going to sit here and spam HP into them like I did previously, but let's just say that this is the enemy you're trying to fight, right? And you have Shurelya's Battle Song and Randuins, right? You can Ghost, you can Randuins, all of your, even the dummies are, you know, going for it, right? You move fast, you get to the spot that you need, and you use the Randuins, right? You know, worst comes to worst, you auto, you know, use your auto refresh. You go in and you can Gale here, or you can use your Randuins here, right? You can use it anywhere. If you get there, great. If they CC you and you have to use it on the front line, that's fine too. But then you have something like Chem Tank. Let's take Chem Tank for example. So if you have Chem Tank,
always useful,
and you do the same thing, right? You Ghost, and then you look at these and you Chem Tank in. You have that, right? Your allies aren't sped up, but of course, you know, you get the Chem Tank, but you don't have the choice of where to use it. So eventually you can use the Randuins in that spot if you can get past them, right? But your team won't be able to follow up, and you know, you have to go Glacial Randuins, right? Even the guy in Korea, I don't know if I've mentioned this video, but there's a guy in Korea that goes this build,
well spent,
and he goes it with Tier, or he goes it with Mana Flow Band, and I just think it's dumb. I just don't like his version of the build, because that means he just has to do this every time, right? And yeah, you can get close enough to them to apply Frozen Heart, but I don't know. And then of course there's Gale Force, right? Gale Force is my favorite, just maybe because it's fun.
One of these.
It's just so fun to do this. What I'm about to show you here. Look at this.
The stars.
You Ghost, then you have Gale,
the answer.
and it's like, oh hey, womp, boom, instant. You just immediately get there, and bam, right? And obviously, if you have your stun leveled, you can move your stun with that too, right? Because obviously, if you're, you know, running at them, you're gonna stun the front line, right? But with the Gale Force, you come in, and then you do like that. You can hit whatever target you want, right? So there's reasons to go each Glacial build, and it's not really, you know, obviously one build is going to be better than the other in certain situations, but it's really up to the player and the person to figure out what they like best, right? There's obvious reasons for going Shurelya's, there's reasons for going Chem Tank. If you're fed and you really want to carry, like if you're in low elo and you don't trust your teammates to be useful with either of these two, then by all means, go Gale Force and, you know, carry yourself. But yeah, I hope that explains as much as I possibly can about Glacial. And if you're interested in this is the spreadsheet. It's available on the guide, and you can come to the stream and type !spreadsheet if you want to see it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this explanation.